Hello and welcome to my second exercise called Who Is This? It's basically an exercise for you to test your own psychic and mediumship skills by looking at someone's photo. And I will reveal who this woman is in a short bit. But just in case you haven't seen this photo posted in the last week on my social media, maybe this is the first time you're seeing this and you might want to pause the video in a second. I'll show you a different picture and see if you can get a good feeling off of her and perhaps write down some of the hits that you might get, some energy vibes, some feelings off of her. Who do you think she was? What does she portray to you in her image? Look at her eyes, look at all of her features, and what are they telling you? So go ahead and pause it and write down those feelings, and please feel free to even put them in the comments before you see the reveal. And here's the big reveal. This woman was Isabel Grace Mackenzie King. Some of you living in Canada might know of her, and especially those of you living in Ottawa. I actually lived down the street from the house where she lived with her son. She was the daughter of a rebel and a mother of a statesman. She was born in 1845 in New York City, where her father had fled after the ill-fated rebellion in Upper Canada. She died in Ottawa one day after the December 17, 1917 election, in which her son lost his North York seat. Mackenzie King never accepted her death and continued to believe she was always near him in spirit. So there's a kind of an interesting story and quite mystical and magical. So please do continue on to find out some more information about her. So, for a minute, let's just talk about her son, who was William Lyon Mackenzie King. He was Canada's Prime Minister for about 22 years. He was born in 1874 and died in 1950. He was leader of the political party from 1919 to 1948. According to the Canadian Encyclopedia, King was Canada's longest serving Prime Minister. He steered Canada through industrialization, much of the Great Depression, and the Second World War. By the time he left office, Canada had achieved greater independence from Britain and a stronger international voice. It had also implemented policies such as employment insurance. Sure, that's all interesting, but what I'm most interested in is how William Lyon Mackenzie King was a huge spiritualist. So let's get into that. And here he is sitting in front of a painting he had commissioned by J.W.L. Forster. And it's basically an altar for her, even with locks of her hair in that little container. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share a CTV article on and a tour of the Laurier House. I'm lucky enough to live down the street, and when it's open during the spring and summer months, I'm able to go and check out the whole building. It's really interesting. In this video, they actually don't talk about his big, I guess it would be called a drawing room, the room that everyone would convene when they come into the house. And it is actually set up in a circular, with seating in a circular fashion. And that was for seances that they would hold. So that's really interesting. And so please do stay tuned for that. You'll see his crystal ball and some other lighthearted talk about his life as a spiritualist. Of course, you've got to dig a little deeper. And one way to do that is to look at the hauntedwalk.com podcasts. If you're interested, they've got a couple of episodes, and I'll put those in the show details here. And, a lot of it doesn't cover a lot of the legacy or even the good, bad, and the ugly. There are some definitely not so nice things about William Lyon Mackenzie King. One thing we do know is that he loved his mother dearly. And we'll see in this article here, it states that she had an intense relationship with her son and supported the development of his political career. Some may say she was domineering and took over his career. So it depends where you read up on information, but we don't actually have a lot. We do know that she was born in New York, as I mentioned earlier, but moved to Canada. And she did marry a lawyer in Toronto, John King. And they moved to Berlin, Ontario, which is now Kitchener, and where he established a practice and they had children. Over the course of his career, he experienced setbacks and financial difficulties, which often frustrated his wife. So she really wanted that social advancement and emotional and financial support. And she put that on her older son, William Lyon Mackenzie King. So throughout life, he was devoted to her, and he wrote in his diary here on September 2nd, "My heart was full of admiration for my mother, of compassion and sympathy for her. She was so noble, so heroic, so brave." And he went on about her. And he said, "If I ever do or come near to such a mark, it will be her life and her love that I have done so." He wrote all these diaries that they found so many years later. She also didn't want him to marry because of his responsibility to her and her husband and his siblings. As she grew older, though, her physical and mental health declined, with headaches and exhaustion following her husband's career setbacks, and she would have abrupt changes in mood from elation to despair, which her children attempted to manage by praising and placating their dear mother. So, what does that tell us? It probably tells us that she was quite domineering over all of her children and not just her elder son. And then after her death, of course, he continued to contact her through spiritualism and wrote about them in his diaries, about the advice and encouragement that he believed he had received from these sessions. So in the afterlife, she continued to domineer his life in many ways. She did not live to see her son become Prime Minister in 1921. She died in 1917, a few hours after he suffered defeat in the December federal election. Her last words were, "Poor soul," in response to news of the defeat. Her daughter had died and she had also been widowed, so she left all of her beneficiary of her estate to him. And they are now both buried together in the family plot in Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Toronto. So, to finish up this intuitive exercise, we are left with having to rely on our intuitive hits, our feelings of this woman. Was she that domineering, self-centered, possessive, manipulative, even spiteful woman, according to Mackenzie King's 1980 biographer here, Joy E. Esbury? She said if Isabel Mackenzie were to be judged on her own accomplishments, she would fade into oblivion. Or should we rely on intuitive hits more closely aligned with Charlotte Gray, who was her biographer, and she apparently presented a more sympathetic account of her character and motives, concluding that, having been disappointed by her husband, she arranged her whole life around her son, who blossomed in the warmth of her love. Gray also highlighted the pressure placed on women of her social background, the shabby genteel who were expected to present the appearance of leisure while undertaking a punishing schedule of household chores with little help or labor-saving devices. I'm perhaps leaving us with more questions than we have answers on her, but intuitively, who do you feel like she was? Please do let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you on your intuitive hits yourself. And I hope you've enjoyed this. I like to keep this up. I think it's a lot of fun to do, and it's a really wonderful way to practice your intuition and your mediumship skills. Also, please do like this video and subscribe to my channel if you can. Both of those things will really help me, as well as sharing this video with your friends, especially those like-minded people who are trying to work on their sixth sense. If you're interested, just wait till the end and you'll see the video that CTV put out. It's a tour of the Laurier house where Mackenzie King lived. Thank you so much and see you soon. Bye-bye.
It was home to two of Canada's longest-serving prime ministers, Sir Wilfrid Laurier and William Lyon Mackenzie King. Laurier House is a National Historic Site right here in the heart of Ottawa and open all summer long for tours. I got to take a walk through the home and learn more about the history inside. Today we were at a National Historic Site getting a glimpse into how some of our former prime ministers once lived. We are getting a tour of Laurier House. Joining me is Site Manager Juan Sanchez. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, this is really exciting. Super cool to be here at Laurier House. Kind of give us an idea of what Laurier House is all about.
I can give you a little history of the house. It was the home of two of our former prime ministers, our longest serving prime ministers, Sir Wilfrid Laurier and William Lyon Mackenzie King. It's one of the most authentic sites we have in Parks Canada in our system. So we have over 10,000 original artifacts.
Wow.
And right now we're in the library. And not only is it authentic, but the placing of all the furniture and the books and where they are authentic to King's time as well.
And different prime ministers use this for different places for this room. It wasn't always a library.
No, in 1896, Liberal supporters purchased this house for Sir Wilfrid Laurier as a gift. When Laurier died in 1919, he willed it to the next Liberal, William Lyon Mackenzie King. When Laurier lived here, this room was actually his pool room, his billiard room.
Okay, so
and then King converted it.
Fun. And he converted to the library, which we know is so iconic in his history.
Correct. Not only is it a library, but it was an extension of his office in the Parliament buildings. He preferred working here than he did in the East Block of the Parliament. So you can imagine the decisions that were made in this room for over 22 years as Prime Minister.
Let's talk about some of those artifacts that are here that are super iconic in his time.
Well, one of the things that we know about Mackenzie King, or most people know about Mackenzie King, is his belief in spiritualism.
Yeah.
So if we look at the piano, we'll see his famous crystal ball.
Okay, so what would he do with the crystal ball?
Well, he himself didn't use the crystal ball, but he
Okay.
had mediums come to the house and to Kingsmere and communicate with the after. What he used was table wrapping. So it was another system of communicating with the afterlife, which you would ask the spirit world a question and the table would wrap once for yes or twice for no.
Interesting, interesting. There's also a shrine of his mother.
He was deeply devoted to his mother, and if you look at the far corner of the library, that's a painting of hers. Underneath the table, there's a small kneeler.
Yeah.
And the silver box you see on the table has a lock of her hair and her wedding ring.
Oh, wow. Still to this day, you can find that in there?
Still to this day, everything is authentic.
That's so cool.
King was extremely close to his family,
Yeah.
and unfortunately they all died within a few years.
Oh, no.
So it was a great loss to him, and that's one of the reasons he started into spiritualism, a way of communicating with the afterlife and his family.
Fascinating. And of course, guest books, we will find so many famous signatures in there.
You can imagine from 1922 right up until he retired in 1950, the amount of people who came here, Churchill, Roosevelt, Rockefellers, generals during the Second World War. It goes on. Shirley Temple, when she was a little girl, was here.
Oh, incredible.
And they all signed the guest book.
That's so cool. What else will you find on this floor? Because we are on the top floor. This is basically the attic.
For when Laurier lived here, most of the attic, except for this room that I said was a billiard room, was servants' quarters.
Okay.
For King, after he converted it, it took him 2 years to convert the house, you'll see his breakfast room. And the reason why breakfast up in the attic is because I mentioned he'd like to run the nation from this room. So it was convenient for him to start from there and just work his way over there. The back half of the house on this floor would have had secretaries, typists, his valet. So this third floor was a hustle and bustle,
Busy
especially
place.
during the war, a hustle and bustle of people, ministers, generals, during that period.
And what are some of the other parts of the house that people will see on this tour?
So the house triangle, so kids from Toronto and Kitchener, they all come out.
Yeah.
On the second floor, we have rooms dedicated to Sir Wilfrid Laurier. So
Okay.
you can see his lifetime and his period.
Interesting.
King's famous bedroom, which Sir Wilfrid Laurier passed away in.
Wow.
We have the first floor, which is all the formal rooms, the dining room, the reception room, the living room, the waiting room.
So many different spots throughout the house. And talk about some of the educational games that are happening here throughout the summer months.
So we have curriculum-based, obviously at a certain, especially grade 8, 9, 10, they learn politics and our history, and they come to the nation's capital to understand how Canada works. So we have curriculum-based programs. We have booklets for younger kids. We have Canada Day events and festivities. And this year, last year we started with a pilot program to introduce high tea on the veranda.
I love that.
So we have an expansive veranda, and we're going to introduce that Victorian high tea with the church actually across the street. We
Sounds
entered
like a
into
great
partnership.
place. And people can come here and take a tour all summer long?
All summer long. Now, we have the shoulder season, which is now until June 30th.
Okay.
And we're closed Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Okay.
But starting Canada Day until Labor Day, we're open 7 days a week.
Incredible.
10 till 5.
And for more information, you could head to parks.canada.ca. Just look for Laurier House and you can find all the details there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for joining.